So we want to know what the outcomes are of a particular event, and we're going to list all the possible outcomes. So for the first two examples, we have an ordinary six-sided dice, and it is numbered 1 to 6, so it's just an ordinary dice, and the dice is rolled once. So I have an ordinary six-sided dice here, and all we are doing is listing what are the possible outcomes. So what sides could be faced upwards when the dice lands. So it could land with the 1 faced up, could land with a 3, or it could land with a 6. So if we were to list all the possible outcomes, it would be each one of these faces on this particular dice, because obviously you can get ones that have got 12 sides or 8 sides or however many sides. So on this particular six-sided dice, our outcomes would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So all we have done is basically list each of these sides that could land faced upwards should we roll the dice. So the next question says, a coin is thrown once, list the possible outcomes. Well, if you have a coin, it can either land with the heads faced up, or it can land with the tails faced up. So we've already got two possible outcomes, heads and tails. So that would just be what we list here, heads or tails. Now the thing about both of these examples is that they're a single event. You're only tossing the coin and you're only tossing the coin once. Same with the dice, you're rolling the dice and you're only rolling it once. So they are both single events. Now the next question says, a bag contains lots of red counters and green counters. Two counters are picked at random. List all the possible outcomes. Now your first impression might be, well, I can't list the outcomes because I don't know how many red counters and how many green counters there are. But you don't actually need to know that. So I'm going to use these dice, and I know it says counters and not dice. But if you just look at the colours, so I've got, instead of red, I've got orange and I've got green because I didn't have a red dice. But the same thing applies. So I'm going to pick two of these dice or two counters. So I could pick an orange and a green one. So that is the same as a red and a green. So if I write that down, red and green. I could also pick a red and a red one. So that would be another option, a red and a red one. I could also pick a green and a green one. What do you think the last one would be that you could pick? Yeah, so we could pick a green and a red one. Now you may think, well, actually we've already picked a red and a green one, so that is the same. But it's not the same because the order is important. Because if you think back to your dependent probabilities, if you picked out a red dice or a red counter, your probability of picking out another red counter, if you didn't replace it, is going to be different. So the order is important. So that's why you list red and green and green and red. So the next question is very similar to this question. So if we use the coloured dice again, so I've got green, red and blue. Again, it says the bag contains one red counter, one green counter and one blue counter. Two are picked at random. List all the possible outcomes. So I could pick a red one and a green one. I could pick a green and then a red one. So remember, we need to include that. I could pick a blue and a red one. And I could pick a red and a blue one. Remember, the order is important, which is why we write them down even though it's still one blue and one red counter. I could pick a green and a blue one. What do you think the last one might be? What do you think this one might be? Yep, so I could pick a blue and then a green one. Okay, so this has 6 different outcomes. Now, it's quite simple and straightforward when you only have maybe 1 or 2 outcomes, or not a lot of outcomes. I mean, I'd probably say 6 is probably the most. Then it starts to get a little bit messy and a little bit difficult to see what's actually going on. See if you can think of another way of maybe listing the outcomes when you go through the next set of questions where I'm asking you to list the outcomes. Do you think there is a better way that you could do it that is much easier to see and understand?